Hello, Geoff. Welcome to Soul
Absolutely.
Stories. So first off, I was hoping you could tell us where you're from and what your association is with GRC.
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from Coventry, but the last 30 years I've been living in Cambridge, where I've been working and work from these days. And I first came to GRC pretty much straight after it came online, so just about 20 years ago, both as a participant initially in retreats and then more recently as one of the delivery team on different retreats and things.
So are you a full-time volunteer with the Brahma Kumaris?
No, I mean I try and get here as much as I can, but I run my own consulting business, so I'm in and out of the country and all over the place with different clients. And
wow. Yeah. Consulting, to me, that sounds like a really sort of analytical job. Requires a lot of logic, a lot of intellectual horsepower in general. And how does somebody like that sort of stumble across spirituality and how do words like peace and calm and love sort of fit into your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, my background is pure maths, applied maths and physics.
Wow, okay.
And a degree in electronic engineering. So in many respects, the most unlikely kind of person that you would expect to be involved in anything with the word spirituality associated with it. I mean, the story behind that is that I was stressed out and trying to fix everything. There's this saying that when you're proud of your hammer, everything looks like a nail. So when you do have a high IQ, you tend to sort of try and fix everything by working it out and,
doing more of the same thing.
That's right. And of course, in many respects, you end up like you're in a hole and you're shoveling away madly trying to get yourself out and just getting deeper and deeper in the hole. So that really forced me to be open, I guess, to the view that there might be other ways of approaching life. I mean, not as an alternative, but just another side to the self that is much more about being present, about being attentive, about listening for feelings, about connecting with people as human beings as opposed to as logic processing entities. And I think you probably hit on the biggest challenge in organisations today, particularly commercial organisations, which is we've gone so far into the kind of left brain analytical thing, and most of the problems organisations face are actually because there's a lack of space created for the human qualities of trust and caring and supporting and being kind and tolerant and all those things, which almost the words sound as though they should be banned from the corporate world. It just seems it's such an alien set of concepts for most organisations.
Which brings me to my next question, and I think you touched upon that a little bit. I'm very interested to know how you've sort of weaved in your spiritual understanding, the learnings from your spiritual journey into your world at work. And I think you touched upon it when you said, people have lost that connection with each other and they don't trust and respect each other anymore. They find it really hard. So how do you, as a consultant, when you go and speak with your team and work with them, what is it that you do differently now that's helped yourself and helped them?
Well, there are those two sides. I mean, personally, I'm much more able now to be in very challenging situations where there are multiple conflicting points of view that people may hold very strongly and therefore have very intense feelings about them, and be able to be in that mess, if you like, and be very calm and very open to what needs to emerge in the moment. It's not that I don't bring that left brain analytical side with me.
Because that's the job, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's part of the job, I think. I mean, certainly most of the clients I work with are firms full of clever people. They're high-tech, they're science, technology, maths, engineering people. And as a consequence, you can't be floaty, flaky, tree huggy. It has to be real and grounded in their real world. But at the same time, one of the things that we lose sight of often in the corporate world is we're social creatures. Human beings like to collaborate and cooperate. It's natural for us to do that. But very often we get ourselves psychologically into a state where we're not able to do that. And I think a lot of what I do for clients these days, I mean, as I mature in my own practice and my own understanding, is I actually help them get out of where they're trapped and where they're stuck. And then the natural collective capability that they have kicks in, and very often they will move forward in a way that they never believed was possible, but you always did. And they're not quite sure what you did because all you've done is removed an obstacle that was stopping them from being able to do what they could do already. So it's not as if I'm going in teaching them some technique or whatever. It's very much helping them get past the barriers and blocks that stop them from doing the great stuff that they're capable of doing.
And you recognise those barriers and blocks because you've been there yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it came from that. I mean, originally I didn't apply any of this in my work. I mean, I'd got my engineering background. I worked for a big engineering consultancy, doing strategic technology management and innovation work. But of course the thing is, as you begin to understand yourself more deeply and you see where you get stuck, well, you know, it's almost impossible, at least for the kind of person I am, to not think, well, I wonder if maybe that's some of the things that's happening for them too. And then of course as you explore that and discover, oh yeah, it was, people come out of those traps and then they move forward. You realise actually, it's a bit like coaching. You know, in coaching the whole idea is that the client that you're working with has all the resources that they need. Your job is just to help them discover them and bring them out. And I think the same is true collectively. If you can help people discover where they are unintentionally and unconsciously inhibiting their collective ability, then human beings do the rest. You know, and that's great. There's nothing nicer than kind of leaving a client situation, seeing people who may have worked together 10, 15, 20 years, for that length of time, suddenly discovering that the other person isn't a moron and isn't kind of out to get them, and finding a way of working together that enables them to achieve stuff they never dreamed they could.
And I think in all of the things you just said, the one thing that kept popping out for me is human interaction and the relationships and the connectedness we have with each other, which is so important. And what you just said also helped me sort of put to bed, I think, one of the myths we have around spirituality, which is it makes you really detached and makes you, you know, sort of go away from people and sort of lead your family and your responsibilities and sort of move away from each other.
It's a very gross way of looking at spirituality. I mean, what it does do is it enables you to become the master of your own inner world. So, you know, you may still have feelings of nervousness or feelings of irritation or whatever, but they don't take you over anymore. So it enables you to be centred and stable in a circumstance where
you otherwise
you'd kind of lose it, and, you know, to the detriment of everyone.
And the point is, once you're that centred and stable, it allows you to be more sort of together and more wholeheartedly participate in a relationship and in an interaction with your team or with your family or whatever. So you're actually making your relationship stronger, as opposed to the contradictory popular belief, which is that it takes you away from people.
Indeed, and you also discover that you have resources within you that you never really gave the space to before, because your head was so full of your models and concepts about how to do this stuff. That your real intuition and that, you know, 80-90% of consciousness that's beneath the surface never gets a look in. And if it's like a small child, you know, if you ignore a child, it stops talking to you and goes off and plays mischief. And as you begin to devote some attention and provide some space for that side of yourself to contribute, it comes out of its shell and starts to contribute. And then you realise actually you can achieve a whole lot more with a whole lot less effort, which in the sort of business jargon is called high leverage, but I tend to think of it as, I'm lazy. I mean, I want to get lots out of stuff by putting no effort in at all, and so it's a very rewarding in that sense.
So could you give us an example of, say, a situation that you've been in recently where you had to sort of bring into play some of the spiritual lessons that you've learned and you were able to transform a situation because of that?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you asked the question, because last week I was in exactly the situation where the kind of typical consultant thinking kicks in of, I've only got half an hour left, there's actually probably 4 hours of work to do with this group of people. You know, what am I going to do to tie a little bow in and finish the thing off successfully? And it was really in that moment that I thought, well, look, I don't have an intellectual answer to this question. And I went much more silent, you know, more deeply inside myself, I guess is the way to describe it, rather than being on the surface of the thoughts, into that kind of depth of the self, in the silence that's there. And I wasn't even sure of what I was going to say, but when the group came back together out of some group work they were doing, we had half an hour left. What happened was, out of my mouth, without pre-thought, just came the question, so where are we? And one of the people who has probably been least engaged and most challenging in the work to date was the one who piped up and said, well, this has been really valuable, but I just don't feel we're finished. It feels like we're only halfway through. Perhaps we could rearrange another session and finish this off. And then others piped up and said the same thing, etc., etc. And so for me, it was just another experience that you don't have to control it all. You don't have to always have the answers, because the answers are there in all of us.
Right.
All it requires is that you know, in this situation, all it required was for me to go to that place of silence and allow what needed to emerge, rather than have to control it.
And this is a great example of what you were mentioning earlier about collective consciousness.
Absolutely, you know, to really have the faith that we have the wisdom in the room.
Yeah.
And it's not just I may be the person who's being paid to make it happen, but I'm not the only resource in the room to make it happen.
Right. Wow. I've certainly learned a lot more tips and tricks from you today. In terms
well, you can come to one of my retreats next time.
I think I will. On that note, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, Sarika,
really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.